Today, we are hearing more stories of life change from Jesus Christ and how our church gets to be a part of it. Welcome to the 167. Do this again. Hey, welcome back to the 167. I'm Lucas Motley, I'm the discipleship pastor, and I'm here with senior pastor Rick George.
Hey, good morning again.
You spend 1 hour maybe at New Life Community Church or in your church of your choice, and what do you do with the 167 hours left?
It really matters. It's a big deal.
Well, and we've been talking in this series about I love my church, and a lot of times it's that we think of it as that 1 hour, but really it's being the church is about being the part of the community, the body of Christ. So you've been asking us every week, what's something that you love about your church? So I'm just going to keep asking you, like what's something that you love about our church?
I love our commitment to missions work, both local and abroad in other countries. So we support missionaries. One of the things I love about our church is we currently have 2 missions organizations that we have supported for years. And in those missions organizations led by husband and wife teams, the husband of both of those teams have died. And we have continued to support the ministry, essentially taking care of the wife after the husband died, even though the ministry is not going to continue to, and it doesn't look like it did before, but we still continue to support them financially because we feel, because of the love we have for them, that we want to be part of their life. And so the Bible tells us to, take care of the widows, and here it is. The missions work looks a little different, but it's something I love about our church.
Yeah, I think that's something that our church does really well is they tie in honor and respect and love with our generosity pieces. It's not just being generous so we can pat ourselves on the back. It's not just a business transaction. It's something that's generous.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just the foreign missions and the local, like it's helping people. It's that work of missions, of loving people right here in our own community, as well as the people that are across the ocean in another country.
Yeah. One of the things that I actually encountered this week is I just took a phone call yesterday from one of the ladies in our church that just had a baby. And it's always funny to me how surprised that people are where they're like, I guess we got on some kind of meals ministry list. And we're like, yeah, like if you have a baby, if you're going to the hospital, somebody just phones it in and people start showing up at your door with food. They call and they say, hey, can we bring this over? And she was like, they have us on there for like 4 weeks. I'm like, yeah, you won't have to cook for like 4 weeks. And believe me, like you can freeze most of it. And, she was just flabbergasted that, they are not a high profile, what you might consider like a high profile family in our church. And she was just, taken aback that, people would show up at her house and be excited for her and her new baby and like just try and love on her and her husband and her kids.
Yeah. So, our family, church family here, just like the demonstration of love, how we love people is what I love about our church.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we were talking about this week, you had some really strong points this week. One of them was, that love pays no matter the cost. We were talking about if we really love people and we value it, that we will pay whatever it costs to love people. So what's an example that you can think of maybe in the recent past for our church, something that the church does as an organization or a story that came out of our church where you think of that where it's like, yeah, love paid the extra cost on that?
All right. So the easy example that I can give is with our Kids Fest.
Mm-hmm.
So we have had, just this year, we have had numerous, I don't have the exact number, I should have looked that number up, but we have had numerous families attend our church simply because they had an exposure to our church through Kids Fest. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was Kids Fest last year and it took them an entire year to get here to church, but they remember Kids Fest.
Right.
And it's not cheap to do Kids Fest. It is thousands of dollars that we invest in bounce houses and food and games and all the human resources that's required, all the volunteers. People sacrifice their time. So Pastor Nick and all the pastors on staff coordinate with different teams to make that day a success. We reach out into the community. It is a lot of hours. It is a lot of money. It's a lot of personal capital and energy expended towards a 3 or 4 hour window on a Saturday.
Right.
That is a huge price to pay because we love our community, but we're willing to pay it because we know that it makes a difference, and people are hearing about Jesus, they're experiencing his love, and the dividends, just like any other investment that you would make, the dividends don't always pay back immediately, but over time it builds, and we have both relational capital in our community and just visibility, exposure in our community. And then the result of that is people come, hear the gospel, get connected to our church, find Jesus, find hope, find freedom, discover their purpose, and then they get to join in and serve, and they begin making a difference.
Well, I love like how you laid that out for us, because I think that people underestimate, like when we talk about sowing seeds of the gospel, and it's like some of that part starts with tilling the ground. You know, I feel like that's what Kids Fest is. It's, you know, breaking up the ground and tilling the ground. Hey, we're not harmful, mean-spirited Christian people that just want to, you know, like, we just want to give you a bounce house and a snow cone. It's just like, you know, you're tilling that ground, and then you got to sow that seed, and then it's got to be watered. It needs sunshine. It needs care, and like all those things that, you know, like we talk about, you'd say at Kid Fest, and then they come in on Sunday morning, and our first impressions team is a smile and a helpful hand to guide them into, you know, our connections team that's contacting them and inviting them to coffee. And it's like all these little things where people just feel like if you just throw the gospel at people, they will just, and it's just like, you know, sometimes that works, and you just, you know, you hit them with the gospel once and it's great. A lot of times it's a lot of work just to get them to receive that word.
Yeah. And so here's what's interesting, okay, to me. So people coming on that Saturday to Kids Fest, they know it processes through their brain, this is expensive.
Right.
They know that this is an expensive event. Many of them, I work the cross guard, you know, so I'm helping people walk back and forth across the street. And I've had numerous people ask how much it costs. And I said, it's free. And then numerous people have said, well, can we make a donation somewhere? Can we? Because they know this is expensive. Like, we want to contribute somehow. And I'm like, nope, we don't take any money today. Like, so this is just free.
Yes, absolutely. You have to come Sunday morning. There's offering boxes in the back.
So, like, in the world, they understand things are expensive. Right?
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't happen for free.
Everything's expensive right now.
But then, you know, our church family then has to adopt that mindset that, hey, this is expensive. And many have. And many people in our church family, many have not. So let's not pretend like everyone in the church is giving, because they are not. But many of the people who attend New Life have said, we understand that it's expensive, and we're willing, because we love God and love people, we're willing to pay that cost. We're willing to be a part of that.
Well, and that's what we do with tithes and offering, is what we do with generosity. I also think one of the things I love when I think of the, you know, love pays the cost. I can't tell you how many just individuals, you know, there'll just be individual members of our church or life groups or things like that, where people come and they'll come to me and say, hey, listen, so-and-so in our life group, or I know so-and-so in the church, and they're really struggling financially with this, or this happened in their life. They had an unexpected medical bill, whatever. And they say, can the church help? And if not, we'll handle it. And if it's a life group, usually I sit with that leader and I go, listen, we absolutely can help with it. My question is, am I depriving you of an opportunity to rally your life group? And, you know, like now we have a lot of life groups that they love this person in their life group, and they'll come and tell me after the fact that, you know, that they've bought them a car, that they've, you know, helped them with a medical bill and stuff like that. Yeah. But, and sometimes it's like, hey, would the church go halvesies with us on this? But I'm like, yes, I love that, because it allows people, like members of our church, to get involved in generosity, or, you know, like really walk through something with people. We've had people, you know, sign people up for college or help with, you know, cars or things like that. And it's just like that is an incredible thing when you are, and it's usually that they can't get to, that's what the thing is, they can't get to church because they don't have a vehicle. And it's like, you love them, and you're like, I want them to be at church, and you're willing to go, and you're willing to pay that.
Yep.
So, when we talk about people giving financially, what do you think is the major barrier? Like, if our listeners are like, yeah, that's a great story, I don't think I can do it. What do you think is some of the major barriers for people to get involved, either paying that cost relationally or paying that cost financially?
Yeah. So let's talk about the financial side. And God's word is very clear that we are supposed to put him first. There's debate among followers of Jesus that say, oh, tithing is an Old Testament thing. I don't believe in tithing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. But Jesus said, give it all. Like, give everything. So take your take your pick. Which do you want, tithing or giving it all? But just that willingness to say, I'm going to put God first. Mm-hmm. Like, that's hard. So plain and simple, whether it's putting him first in your relationship, in your calendar, in your finances, you pick the topic, it's difficult to put God first. So that's the first reason that it's like people hesitate. The second one is just the pull of our culture. So the pull of our culture is to go and get as many things as you can for yourself.
Right.
And it's promoted with terminology like, well, you deserve it. Like, you should go buy a new car because you deserve it. And use your credit card to get whatever you want because you deserve it. And so the pressure from culture to get as much as we can then interferes with, well, now I've gotten all that I want and I cannot afford to put God first. Mm-hmm. And then because of that, we're unwilling then to say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff to free up some of my expendable income so that I can put God first, and then we'll regroup. And because it's hard, people's like, no, I just can't. I'm in a place financially where I just can't.
Right.
And then we talk about generosity, you know, on a Sunday, and people, like, their heart, our church family would say, well, my heart wants to be generous, but my finances don't allow me to be generous.
Right.
And so they try, and then they'll say, oh, I was generous. I bought $10 worth of groceries for somebody, or, well, that's like a loaf of bread today or something like that.
Yeah,
but
one egg.
Yeah. So, so to this week, one of the points is, well, that's not generosity because you can't be generous with somebody else's money.
Right.
Like, you can't steal somebody else's money and say, well, now I'm being generous. No, that it doesn't work that way. So you have to regroup and start over with a new mindset. And it's just really difficult. It's very beneficial, but it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, and I think that people struggle with that. Like you said, they want to be involved in that in their heart. And, you know, it costs sacrifice financially. And I think relationally with people, I think that we are afraid to become responsible for people. You know, and that could even be financially. You start to help somebody out. Oh, they're going to take advantage of me. You know, what if this is not enough? And then it's like, well, what if I help them out and they still, you know, like, they're behind on their car payments. I help them and then they still lose it. And there's all these different ifs and buts. And I think it's hard. Like I said, there's phone calls that we take where it's like we have a flock, and it's like somebody's like, well, I'm involved in this. And it's like, okay, well, I've got to go help because, you know, I'm responsible for this person. And I think that people hesitate at that.
Yeah. So ultimately, I think for the most part, people who say, I'm a follower of Jesus, they want to experience what the New Testament church, the church that Jesus is building that extends to us today, they want what is offered. Like, they want to experience everything that they can experience. They're just not willing to do what is necessary to get there. So the passage that I used, Acts 2:42, really going back a little bit all the way to 47, where it says they all gathered together and they listened to the apostles' teachings. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love church. I love the sermons, the podcasts. So everyone's in on that.
But what we really love is to break bread.
Yeah, and then, hey, we're going to share a meal together. Oh, yeah, invite me over. I love to share a meal with you and take communion. I love that. Man, I am all in on that. Mm-hmm. And then what follows is it said they sold all their possessions, and they took the proceeds of what they sold and they shared it with one another. It's like, can we just have dinner together? Because that'd be like
When are we going to build?
Yeah, I was with you on the communion and the dinner and listening to the sermons, but wow.
Our next project is going to be the New Life Community Church dormitories that you get to move in, and
everybody sold their house and we just all moved in. So yeah, so we're that's why it's just hard. It's like, yes, I want that. Oh no,
I don't want this.
Yeah, you have to do no, not willing to do that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that you said this week too that I really want to hone in on, because like when we're talking about this, we're talking about helping people who are lost, helping people who are struggling, things like that. I think it's hard for us sometimes, and maybe one of those barriers is compassion. It's like some people are like, well, they've made their bed and they're going to lie in it, or like they keep making bad choices, so just forget about it. They're never going to change. And we get to that part with the hardened heart. And so you said something this week that I thought was just incredibly profound. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to talk about this on 167. But you said that lost people aren't lost on purpose.
And I didn't say that, and it wasn't profound because of me. It came right out of the book.
Right.
So.
I didn't say that you wrote it. I just said that you said it. I was trying to give you...
And then if I say it enough, then I can say, like I've always said.
Yeah. It's like, first you have to cite the quote, then you'd be like, a friend of mine said this.
Yes.
And then, like for me, I get to go, a pastor friend of mine, he always says the lost aren't lost on purpose.
There you go.
So the lost aren't lost on purpose. But it was, and maybe this is, okay, you expounded on this part, which was, you made the point that when people are driving, like, dudes that won't take directions and they get lost, that it's not that they don't know where they are, it's that they don't know where they are in the moment. And I was like, that was the part that I was like, oh my goodness, that's so great, because in my head I had pictured that where I was like, you could say, like Chris and I have this rule when I drive, which is don't tell me that I'm going to miss the exit, because she'll be like, unless I'm asking, like, oh, if you're navigating, whatever, because if she's navigating, then it's 5 feet before the exit. It's going to be like, hey, that's your exit, like pulling off. But when I'm driving, like she'll let me miss the exit. And then because I'll be talking about, like, we'll be talking about something, and then I'll stop and I go, that was my exit. And she'll go, yes, it was. And I will pull off and I will, turn around and go the other way. And I tell her, I'm like, it's better if you just let me figure it out than, like starting a fight in the car or whatever. And so in those moments, it's not that I'm lost. I'm on I-35. I know I'm on I-35. I don't know that I missed my turn. I don't know how to get back to where I'm supposed to be. And I thought that was so profound, because I'm like, I deal with a lot of people that come to church and they say, I'm an alcoholic. I struggle with addiction. They know where they are. I struggle with abusive relationships. I was abused. Like, they know where they are, but they have no idea. Like, what makes them lost, like if you're lost in the forest, you're like, I know where I am. I'm in the forest. What makes you lost is your inability to get back on your own. Yeah. And I thought that was so profound. Could you just unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah. So we just assume that because you're stupid and you made bad choices, you have no idea what you're doing.
Right.
And that's not always the case. Like you said, you're like, I know, like I had in my mind, like I shouldn't drink so much, but you just kept drinking. And it wasn't intentionally trying to ruin your life. It was just a pattern that developed. The same thing, like when you're driving, like I've heard stories of people who leaving, like they were on vacation, right? They were like, it's happened to me before in Dallas, because it's the highway system is crazy there. But I knew
the Metroplex.
Yeah. So like I knew I needed to be going towards Kansas City, which is north. And so I got on 35 and drove a little ways and realized I'm going south. Like I'm never going to get to Kansas City going on this road. And I didn't take the south ramp on purpose. It was just confusing.
Yeah.
And sometimes life is confusing, and you need a GPS system oftentimes to say, take the next exit and turn around, recalculating, turn around, go. And you're like, but I know I'm going the right direction. No, turn around. Yeah. And the Bible is that GPS system for us. Mm-hmm. The family, the followers of Jesus that are in your life are there to be the GPS system to say, hey, you're going the wrong direction and you need to turn around, and we can get you back on 35 North.
Well, and that's a great point, because what the church does to service that for us is, and why the community matters, is if you are not being honest, if you're one of those Christians that's just like, everything's fine. Nobody talk, like, I'm not going to bring up any of my things because it's really nobody's business. Nobody can help you. And it's like,
Yeah.
but the minute that you come to somebody else and you go, hey, listen, I'm struggling, usually you find out they go, oh man, I struggle with that too. And you're like, really? Like it always, I've never had a negative experience. I would say, I think that everybody's had that experience where you tell the wrong person something and they blab it, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, but usually coming to a pastor, coming to somebody who's in leadership, going to a life group, leader, or like somebody like a freedom table leader, it's like somebody like that where you go to them and say, I'm struggling, a friend, a Christian friend, and they go, hey, let me help you get back. That has always benefited.
Yeah. And I mean, the concept, that metaphor would be, hey, I've got my GPS. Like I Google mapped it. It's on my phone, and it told me to turn around. But instead of listening, I just turned the volume down.
Right.
Right. I exited that app. I don't want to hear that. Like
I know where I'm going.
I know what I'm doing. It's like, well, why did you Google it to begin with if you knew so much?
Right.
But that's kind of our tendency. Someone says, hey, you're going the wrong direction. We turn them off. We distance ourselves. Hey, I see this in your life, and can you want to talk about it? Nope. I'll just turn the volume down, or I'm not going to contact you again. And it happens all the time. And again, what I love about our church is the willingness to keep trying, to keep putting our hand out and say, I know that you've rejected it before. We're still here. We have that consistent message. Mm-hmm. That's what that was about. The consistent message of God loves you. He has a plan for you. And we're here. And people have come. People have gone. People have loved us. People have hated us. We have a consistent message. God still loves you. He's not going anywhere. And if you will let us, we can help you get back on track. And some people do, some people don't. But our message remains consistent. Yeah. The message of Jesus. He is the hope of the world. The church is the hope of the world. The message that we share through the church is important because people matter. And we're partnering with Jesus in rescuing the lost.
Well, and I think something that when you're talking about that metaphor, it made me think about, and this is where I think that people are, and it helps me have compassion for them, is, so this might seem weird, but Manchester, New Hampshire has a 435 like system. And I grew up in Illinois, didn't really have, like, we had the Ike and the Dan Ryan, which is basically like a T section into Chicago, right? And so I went to a wedding out there. My best friend got married. And so it was my responsibility as the best man the next day before my flight to take the suits back. Like, you rent them at Men's Warehouse or whatever, and he's like, yeah, just throw them in my car, go do that. And then you come back and you'll catch your flight that evening. And I was like, okay. So I got on and he's like, what you have to do when you said that, take whatever it is, whatever south. And I'm like, cool. And I took it south, and then all of a sudden it said that I was going north. And I'm like, oh. And so I turned around. This is a toll road. And so I paid a $5 toll probably 12 times. Like, I was just like, I'm not going to bother him. He's on his honeymoon. I'm not going to call him. And I was just like, and by the end of it, I'm like, why is this? I'm just screaming at the car. Like, I go on, and I don't realize that it's like a 435 loop where, like, if you go 435 south, eventually it will become 435 north. And it was like the exit that I was looking for was right where that happened, and I never got off on the exit because I was so worried about doing this, and I just ended up in this loop and paying that cost over and over and over again. And it was funny because it was with change from his car. He had like a bucket of quarters, and so I'm just like going through this over and over. And finally, I called him, and I was like, "Where is this?" And he's like, and he had to walk me through it to get off the loop that I was stuck on. And I could have exited at any time, but it's just like I needed his help to get off. And then I, got off, and I did not go back on that highway. I went back through the city to wherever I needed to go. But during that thing, like and he was funny because he's like, how many times you pay that toll? And I was like, you don't want to know. There may not be any quarters in your car when you get back.
And so, again, to just tap into that, he was familiar with that because of the consistency of him taking that route. So he knew.
He's been there.
Yeah. So that's why it's important for me and our church to have a consistent message, Because there are churches you can go to and their message changes all the time. Like
Right.
whatever the current trend is or whatever the hype is or whatever, captures people's attention. And let's jump on that and let's go with that. And it's going to create a buzz, and it will. And then it'll collapse. And then people say, well, that church is so flaky and they did this and they went here and they did. No, the consistent message, Jesus, salvation. You're going to hell and you're dead. Jesus wants to give you life and you can have a relationship. That has been our consistent message. And it's that consistent message is, again, what I love about our church. And that consistent message, and for years, I'll say it's as simple as ABC.
Right.
You have to admit you're a sinner, believe Jesus died for you, and confess with your mouth. And I've had people over the years say, I was talking to this friend of mine, and they were broken, and I said, you should follow Jesus. And they're like, well, I don't even know what that means. And I've said, well, it's as simple as ABC. And they remember what I've said because it's consistent. It's true. It's consistent. And it's not flaky and all over the place. It's 23 years of consistent message of Jesus and the church and working together.
Well, you were preaching that message this week, and then we also had our good friend Gene came and gave his testimony.
Yeah, did a great job.
I want to encourage you guys because half our audience follows us on YouTube and half it follows on audio. I'm going to send you to our website, newlifegardener.com. And when you go there, you can click on messages. You can also find us on YouTube at New Life Gardener. And on that YouTube page, it has our entire service. So you can go and watch Gene's testimony. I highly recommend it. But because it is a visual thing, I want to send you to YouTube. I want to send you there. And then after this podcast, we're going to have another story, just an interview story of somebody who wants to talk about why they love their church, Landon Taylor. And so we have plenty of stories. Go watch our 7-minute stories here on the 167, either on YouTube or here on the audio podcast at the end of the episodes. But just do that. Be encouraged because it was an incredible testimony. Just really quick, what was your favorite part? Like, why do we include that in the message?
Yeah, so part of the purpose of having the testimonies, either video or live at church, is to help our church family as a whole see the impact of our church in their life. And for Gene, they attended a church and they were kind of going through the motions of church. And then things happened in life and in our culture and COVID and all kinds of things, but then they found themselves at New Life. And that decision to come here started a chain of events in his life, connections with people that literally changed his life. And the Holy Spirit used various people, church services, the messages, all in conjunction to bring him to a place where he realized, I need help, and God did an incredible work in his life. And it wasn't because of one person. It wasn't because of one sermon. It wasn't because of one song. It wasn't because of one ministry. It was the church. And the church is the hope of the world. And because of the church, meaning not the building, all the people coming together, shaking a hand, hugging a neck, smiling face, an invite to a ministry, like all these things working together produced an incredible work in his life. And it was powerful. And my prayer is that that message would continue to change his life, because like he's not perfect now. He's still, right? So he's got work yet to do, and God is still working, but God will work in other people's lives because of the testimony that they heard from Gene's life.
Yeah. So go check out that testimony on our website. Stay tuned for a 7-minute story here on the 167. We'll see you guys here next time. And if you want to share your story, make sure you drop a comment to us so we can connect with you. And we'd love to hear your story as well. See you next time.
Welcome back to the 167. We are doing more I Love My Church stories. I am Carissa Motley. I am here today with my friend Landon Taylor. Thanks so much for coming in, Landon, and telling your story about what you love about New Life.
Yeah.
So thanks for being here.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no problem. So if I say to you, as Pastor Rick has been saying on Sundays, I love my church because, how would you finish that sentence?
There's a lot there. I love my church because I think at the foundation, this church they've shown me what it's like to fall in love with Jesus. And so I grew up in the church. I don't want this to be too long, but I grew up in the church. I was introduced to God at a very early age, along with Jesus. I was saved at 14, and I've always believed in God.
Okay.
But I think there's a pretty big difference between believing in God and being saved, and being in love with your King.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think the very first and foremost reason I love this church is because they showed me how to do that.
Cool. I would love to hear more about how that happened for you. But real quick, first, how long have you and your family, when you can say their names, how long have you guys been at New Life, and what brought you here?
Yeah, so my wife, Blaze, just like the fire, Blaze. My wife, Blaze, and I, and our 2 kids, Peyton and Reese. Peyton is 10, Reese is 8. We've been here for 3 years. This month, 3 years.
Awesome.
So, second part of the question
Is what brought you here?
Oh, yeah. Well, you and Lucas. So
That's the short version of the story.
Yeah, there's a string of events there that happened. One was COVID.
Yeah.
The other is we were going to church in Overland Park, about 30 minutes away. And our church was closed at the time, and we were building a relationship with y'all, our daughters, and you guys living in the neighborhood. And you asked us to come, and it always feels good to be wanted.
Sure.
And that's the way we felt. And then we came, and that feeling continued. It felt like New Life wanted us here. So you and Lucas invited us. And then the other thing that brought us here was simple as geography. We were driving 30 minutes to church, and now we drive 3.
Yeah.
And that's much easier.
It makes a big difference.
It's much easier.
For sure.
So.
And there's definitely something about, we live in the same neighborhood, so we see each other a lot, but being able to see the people that you go to church with and be in community with them is
Correct.
a big part of what makes it appealing to be at church.
And to that point, Blaze and I always wanted our kids to go to church with the people that they went to school with.
Yeah.
To be in the same community, the people that they went to school with. And so we where we were going to church, that was going to be very difficult.
Sure,
and
of
so
course.
this provided an opportunity for that.
Yeah. You see them at school, you see them at the soccer
That's right.
fields, you see them all over the place.
And we do.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
We do.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, it's been great. So how has being a part of New Life impacted either or both your relationship with God and your relationship with other people? And we can also cycle back to that first question that you talked about, the reasons why you love your church and how it helped you fall in love with Jesus.
Yeah.
So any of that.
Sure. So the church that I grew up in, I've said this a lot. I love my church, that I grew up in, but, as simple as, instruments. Mm-hmm. There's something about whenever there's instruments involved, at least for me personally, that helps me connect. And I had never had that.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing immediate that I received from New Life, but also just the heart of worship.
Okay.
Seeing some emotion. There wasn't a lot of emotion in my church growing up. And so seeing people have the emotion in worship itself helps you draw, closer to the feet of Jesus.
For sure.
Next, life groups. That in and of itself, the rawness of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just study, but it's real life.
Yeah.
Especially the age group that we're working with.
And then why don't you just tell everybody, and if they're not familiar, next is our young adult ministry.
Correct.
So 18 to 25-year-olds.
Right.
And you and Blaze lead a life group of 18 to 25-year-olds.
Yes.
What has that been like?
Oh, it's been awesome. We started it with y'all, and
Sure.
then we divided and conquered from there. But man, to see that age group on fire, it's an inspiration because I know I wasn't there at that age.
Yeah.
And to see these, I call them kids, but
Right.
young adults,
Right.
on fire, and they're searching, and they're leading.
Yeah.
They really are.
For
and,
sure.
and the way that they grab people and pull them in and bring them into community. So just to see Jesus working there, has been really, really encouraging and inspiring.
Yeah.
I want to use that word. But as far as, my relationship with God, we also have, freedom's a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to freedom and you hear testimonies. And so this church really, how can I say this? I don't want to say it normalized sin, but what it did is it allowed people to talk about their sin, I guess.
Yeah.
Growing up
definitely.
in church, there was a call every Sunday for someone to come forward, but hardly anybody ever did.
Right.
And this church basically took sin and said, guess what? You're not going to win, and we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And when that door opened, it was like, oh, wow. Like we really can talk about this stuff, and then you feel so much better after.
Sure.
Because the more you talk about it, the closer you get to Jesus. And so my relationship with God changed a lot through worship, life group, and probably freedom.
Awesome.
So
that's really cool. I
Yeah.
love hearing that.
Yeah.
And there is just, I would agree. I think that there is something really powerful about being able to talk about real things,
absolutely.
right? Talk about this is actually what's going on in my life. And not all churches, but a lot of churches, you feel like you have to come in and put on a facade, be somebody that you're not admit to all the things that are going wrong in your life. And I think that's not what we're supposed to do, right?
I agree.
So that's awesome. So what keeps you coming back here?
So part of it's conviction.
Okay.
So I was actually talking about this with somebody today, but part of my faithfulness to a church is a conviction that I've got. I've taught for a long time that the relationship with Christ to his church is very similar to, he uses all throughout Scripture, the illustration of a marriage
Right.
between a husband and wife. And, just because I get maybe frustrated with my wife or Blaze and I don't see eye to eye on something doesn't mean I leave.
Right.
It doesn't mean she doesn't leave. And I think Christ calls us to be, in fact, I know he does, he calls us to be faithful to our faith family.
Right.
And I don't want to treat my church like a Walmart versus Costco. Like just because you don't have what I want doesn't mean that I'm going to come over here.
Okay.
I think if there are no church is perfect.
Right.
Right. No church
course.
is perfect.
Of course.
But if there are things you don't like about you, get involved, right? But I don't want part of us keep coming back is we want to be committed, and we want the people here to know that we're going to be faithful to them.
Awesome.
Even if there's things that come up that we don't necessarily agree with, it doesn't mean we're rushing for the door.
Sure.
Right. We want
Sure.
people to know that we're here.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really good. Pastor Rick was talking on Sunday about the concept of faithfulness and obedience.
Right,
That
right.
this church is built on the idea of faithfulness and obedience. And so that's a great way to think about being faithful, is faithfully being committed to your church, right? There's a lot of ways we can be faithful.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Thanks. What else keeps me coming back? So I'll bring life groups back into it.
Yeah.
Our life group, the group that we're doing, they're so on fire right now. I don't want to say I'm leading them because I'm just trying not to screw up. I just want to step out of the way and say, you guys just keep going, and then interject myself where I need to.
Right. Because they need that. They're 18 to 25. They need some of that.
Right. But I love watching it.
Yeah.
Life group itself, them growing and us, I'm very open with them. Like, hey, we want this to grow, and then we want to split off. Like the goal here is we want other people to experience this.
Right.
And so just being a part of that in and of itself probably keeps me coming back. But I'll go back to the other one, worship. I love Sunday mornings. I do. I love worship. Raising my hands is new to me, and it makes me uncomfortable. Right. It does. But it's funny that every time I do it, it's like, oh, that was it. That I'm supposed to do that.
Yeah.
It's okay to come to the feet of Jesus and
Sure.
emotionally just, kind of unload.
Yeah.
I think he likes that.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that, which we did not prepare for? So this is a little on the spot. Is that so your son Peyton is now in 5th grade, so he sits in service with you guys. How has that affected your view of the worship service differently? Do you feel like that gives you a different perspective in sort of how you encounter the service and think about what he's experiencing there as well?
Sure. Yeah, so we teach our kids that we want you to not only be able to come and talk to us about anything, but we want them to be able to worship as well and not be afraid.
Yeah.
That talking about Jesus or stopping and praying or whatever, or singing to a gospel song in the car is all of those are okay things.
Yeah.
But the best way for them to know that that's okay is to see me doing that.
Definitely. Yeah.
I never want my kids, and now that Peyton is in there and can watch, I never want him to be able to say that, Dad wasn't worshiping.
Yeah.
Dad, when Dad was in church, Dad had his heart in it. I want him to be able to say those things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it has, because, I want to be an example.
Yeah. That's really cool.
I want him to be, kids look at their parents look at me and go, oh, like I can sing really loud, I can close my eyes and raise my hands. And whenever you worship like that, it opens the door for communication with Jesus so much more.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, yes, to answer your question, yes, it does change it, but hopefully that's the main thing he sees.
I love that.
Thanks.
That's so cool. So how do you feel like our mission here, right? Love God, love people.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've talked about a lot of things that are connected to this. How do you feel like you are called to be part of the mission that we believe in here at New Life?
Yeah. So personally, I've been going through this last couple of months is, how am I called? And I keep getting that you need to pay attention to your family. Like right now, your family is your calling, and let everything else. You be responsible with your family, and then whenever you're ready, I'm going to use you. So I have tried to, in one sense, kind of push how I'm being called, not to the back, but I really want to put what I can control, so to speak, right at the front, which is my family and myself. Next, life groups. Of course, we feel called just because we're leading one.
Yeah. And you're doing great.
Thanks.
It's so great. It's such a great life group. I see the same thing. Yeah. The young adults in your group they're super connected, first of all. Yep. Just real quick, tell everybody what has happened with your group lately. You guys meet Sunday nights, but also...
Yeah, so our group, and this is the kids, right? But we meet Sunday nights. And then they go and they do things together on Tuesday night. They go and do worship somewhere on Thursday night, and then they come over back to our house on Friday night, and we're watching The Chosen all the way through. And so, that ended up, you get touches, right? Multiple touches throughout the week. It's not just Sunday morning. Right. It's not just Sunday evening.
Right.
And we're constantly texting, and the group chats always roll. And so that in and of itself encourages you throughout the week.
Definitely.
Right? So you can talk about something on Sunday, and then they get to reconnect and bring it back up on Tuesday, and then maybe on Thursday, and then on Friday. There's just, that's kind of like the Acts 2:42 church, right?
Absolutely.
And so watching that kind of play out is a lot of fun.
I think it's really truly, yes, it's a community that has been created and that has started to kind of hone itself. I think it's really exciting to watch. Lucas and I talk a lot about, Gen Z. They kind of have a bad rap right now, but they are really hungry for authentic community and for authentic relationships with people. And so as an elder millennial, right, that is the demographic that I am in. I see that, and I think it's really exciting. And I love that being a part of it is really, it is inspiring. I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, community and hungry. Those are two good words to use it. It is a community with them, and they are really hungry. Yeah. And again, that's inspiring because I wasn't that hungry at that age. Yep. And so just to sit back and kind of watch that and be a part of it a little bit, it's like, okay, this is really neat.
It is really cool. Yeah. Is there anything else on that, on how you feel like love God, love people plays out for you?
Yeah. Freedom is great. And I don't know how I'm called there. I just know that I show up. I just show up. I love the relationships that are being built there. But I think that once a week, with the homework and all the things like that forces you to dive into the word daily. It forces you to pray a lot and forces you to be prayed for. And those are all scriptural things, right? They're great.
Right.
And the more reps you get at that, the better. And that's what freedom calls. So I don't know how I'm being called in freedom, but I like what's being built there. And I like what's showing me personally from a selfish perspective. But love God and love people, it's as simple as it gets, And so I think if we focus on loving God, and then as of right now, the season of life that I am of loving my family and really teaching us to pray together, not just, as Lucas says, but before sleepy time and before meals, but, whenever we're frustrated or we're scared or we're angry, all of us getting in the rhythm of praying, then that has to have a ripple effect of our relationships. When our friends, whenever we're frustrated with each other, or we have a disagreement, can we pray together? So I think that may be part of the call, but that's just where I'm at right now.
So you're just along for the ride, really, it sounds like.
Yeah, I hate to say that there's no plan, but I'm just kind of trusting God that He's going to use me whenever He thinks I'm ready. And right now I'm just focusing on that.
Well, He's using you right now.
Thanks.
For sure, in a lot of ways. And it's been so awesome to be on this journey with you guys.
Thanks.
And to be friends and to just be able to see all of this come in to play.
Yeah.
It's been really great.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on today, telling people part of your story. Again, this is Landon Taylor. If you guys want to connect with Landon, he would love to talk to you. So thanks so much for being here. And we are going to have more I Love My Church stories as part of this series. So make sure that you stay tuned into the podcast. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
If
you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.